The night my entire life changed, I was asleep in the back seat of my car with my keys laced between my fingers like claws. Not camping, not road tripping, homeless. 38 years old, former project manager, daughter, sister, human being, curled under a Goodwill blanket in a Denver Walmart parking lot because the people who were supposed to love me had systematically taken everything I had. The knock came at 1:47 in the morning. I jerked awake so fast my elbow cracked the window. For one disoriented second, I thought it was my mother's voice again, the one permanently installed in my skull like a bad signal that never drops. "I always knew you'd end up like this, Sara." But it wasn't her. It was a police officer. Flashlight straight to my face, cold, surgical. "Ma'am, roll down your window." I cracked it 2 inches, handed him my license with shaking hands, watched him walk back to his patrol car in my rearview mirror, watched him type, lean closer, type again. Then he went completely still. I saw his shoulders lock, saw him press his radio, saw him stand up too straight, walk back toward my car, and let his right hand hover near his holster. "Ma'am," he said, "step out of the vehicle, slowly." "Officer, what did I do?" "Just step out. Keep your hands visible." My legs shook so badly I could barely stand. The cold air hit me like a wall. I wrapped my arms around myself and stared at him, and he said the words that ripped 26 years of buried memory straight out of the ground. "When I ran your license, a federal flag came up, an old one." He held my gaze. "From 1998. The world tilted. 1998. The year I turned 12. The year my Uncle Ethan died in a car explosion my mother told me was a gas tank accident. The year I stood 30 feet away in a pink jacket, watching the only person in my family who truly loved me burn. "That can't be right," I whispered. "I was a child." He lifted his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 8. Homeland Security has been notified. They want her exact location. They said they're sending someone now." I sat on that curb in the freezing dark and felt 26 years of something press against the inside of my skull like water behind a cracking dam. Something I had seen in 1998 had been following me my whole life. Tonight, it had finally caught up. Let me tell you how I ended up in that parking lot. Because it didn't happen gradually. It didn't happen through bad decisions. It happened because my family made it happen. My name is Sara. 18 months before that parking lot, I had an apartment, a job, a credit score, and a life I had built quietly and carefully with no help from anyone. I was the kind of person who showed up, paid her bills, and asked for very little. My family had always found that disappointing. My mother, Barbara, had spent 38 years making sure I understood I was the lesser daughter. Not with cruelty exactly. She was too controlled for cruelty. With precision, with the specific surgical accuracy of a woman who knows exactly which words leave marks that don't show. Sara works so hard for someone with her limitations. Not everyone can be like your sister, Dana. My sister Dana was the golden child, the real estate agent, the highlight reel. My mother introduced her at parties the way people show off trophies. I had spent 38 years trying to stop needing their approval and failing at it every single time. The unraveling started on a Wednesday in April. I stopped by my mother's house to drop off estate paperwork. She opened the door, looked me up and down like she was assessing furniture she was considering throwing out, and said, "What now?" I said, "Just need a signature." She signed without reading, handed it back, and as I turned to leave, she said it, quietly, almost casually. 38 and still needing help. I always knew you'd end up like this. 3 days later, my credit card was declined for a tube of toothpaste. I drove to the bank. The teller told me gently, 2 additional credit cards had been opened in my name 3 months ago, registered to an address in Greenwood Village. combined balance of $42,000 in charges I had never made. Greenwood Village, Dana's neighborhood. I drove straight there. Dana and her husband Marcus were sitting at the kitchen island, calm, prepared, like they'd been watching for my car. "Dana," I said, "why are there accounts in my name?" She didn't even flinch. "It was temporary. We needed a credit bridge. Relax." "You committed fraud against me." Marcus smiled, the particular smile of a man who has never once been afraid of consequences. "Come on, Sara, you weren't using your credit anyway." I turned to leave. My mother stepped out of the hallway. She had been there the entire time, listening. "Sara," she said, cold, even, "you are not going to call the police, and if you try, you don't have a place in this family." Something inside me cracked, not broke, cracked like ice before it goes through. 3 weeks later, the lawsuit arrived in my name. My employer cut my hours over credibility concerns. My landlord declined to renew my lease. When I called my mother and asked for 2 weeks in the guest room, she said, "You made your bed, Sara. Now lie in it." So I did, in the back seat of my car with my mother's voice on loop in the dark and my keys between my fingers and nowhere left to go. The black SUV rolled into that parking lot like a shadow crossing still water. No sirens, no lights, just slow and deliberate and inevitable. A woman stepped out, tall, dark coat, badge on her belt. She walked toward me, and when she saw the full picture, dirty sneakers, tangled hair, Goodwill blanket visible through the car window, something in her expression shifted into careful. "Sara?" she said. "Yes." "Special Agent Diana Marsh, Homeland Security." She sat in my passenger seat and opened a tablet and turned it toward me. A photograph filled the screen. Uncle Ethan, young, uniform crisp, eyes that crinkled at the corners exactly the way I remembered. I covered my mouth with both hands. "Ethan Cole was not simply a military contractor," Marsh said quietly. "In 1998, he uncovered evidence of a major defense data breach, sensitive technology being funneled to people who should never have had access to it. He was going to testify." "They told me it was a gas tank," I whispered. "It wasn't an accident, Sara." The words landed in my chest like something cold and final. "He left a contingency file," Marsh continued. "In it, he wrote that if anything happened to him, a federal protection flag should be placed on one person, someone he trusted completely." She held my gaze. "Someone he believed might one day be targeted." My voice came out barely above a breath. "Me?" She nodded. "He specified that Homeland Security be notified if your life ever showed signs of what he called systematic destabilization, loss of housing, financial sabotage, social isolation. The parking lot, the lawsuit, my credit score destroyed. You made your bed." "He saw this coming," I whispered. "He planned for it," Marsh said. "And Sara," she tapped the tablet again. A grainy photograph appeared. My mother, younger but unmistakably her, standing outside a warehouse, talking to a man whose face was half turned from the camera. The year stamp read, March 1998. I felt the air leave my body completely. "Your mother worked as a financial administrator for the contractor at the center of the breach," Marsh said. "We believe she was paid to move encrypted files into a vulnerable server. We believe Ethan found out and confronted her the night he died." My voice cracked. "She let them kill him?" "We believe she didn't know what would happen," Marsh said carefully, "but she knew enough, and she spent 26 years making sure you stayed too broken and too small to ever remember what you saw. The Sunday dinners, the comparisons, that you always knew you'd fail. Every cruel word suddenly reframed into something more horrifying than cruelty. It was never about me being less. It was about them being terrified. You were never the family failure, Sara," Marsh said. I waited. "You were the witness." We drove to my mother's house before sunrise. She answered the door in her robe, lipstick already perfect. That detail hit me somewhere it had no right to. When she saw Marcia's badge, the color left her face like water draining from a glass. Her eyes found mine immediately. "What have you done?" she whispered. "What have I done?" The words came out of me like something that had been pressurized for years. "Mom, you let them ruin my credit. You let them take my housing. You called me a failure my entire life because you were terrified of what I saw in a parking lot when I was 12 years old." Her lips pressed together. Dana appeared at the top of the stairs, hair messy, eyes moving rapidly across the badges, the officers, my face. Behind her, Marcus, who took one look at the assembled agents and said immediately, "We want a lawyer." "You'll have one," Marsh said. But first, she turned her tablet so Marcus could see it. His connection to the same man from the 1998 photograph. 14 months of documented financial transfers laid out in clean digital rows. Marcus went the color of old paper. Dana looked at him, her voice cracked open. "You told me nobody was getting hurt. You told me Sara just needed to step back from the family for a while. You told me—" "Stop talking," Marcus said sharply. "He told me I just needed to disappear," I said quietly. Dana flinched like I'd struck her. "I used you," I said, "the same way that man used Mom in 1998. You were so busy being the golden child, you never noticed you were being handled." My mother sat down on the bottom step. She looked old, older than I had ever seen her look. Just a woman who had been running from something for 26 years and had finally run out of road. "I was protecting this family," she said. "You were protecting yourself," I said, "and you destroyed me to do it." One tear moved down her face. Just one. I had never once seen my mother cry. "I didn't know they'd kill him," she whispered. "I thought it was just files. I thought it was harmless. And then it wasn't. And I was so afraid. And I know," I said. She looked up. "I know you were afraid. But fear doesn't give you the right to spend 38 years telling your daughter she's nothing. Fear doesn't give you that." She had no answer for that. For the first time in my life, she had absolutely nothing to say. The warehouse had been abandoned for 20 years. Yellow tape, boarded windows, the particular silence of a place where something terrible happened, and the walls never forgot it. I stood outside it in the gray Denver morning light and felt 12 years old. "Walk me through it," Marsh said beside me. "Anything you remember." I closed my eyes. The images came in fragments, sound before picture. My mother's voice. "Get back in the car. Get back." Uncle Ethan's voice, low and urgent. "Stay down, Sarah Bear, behind that crate. Don't make a sound." A man shouting, a flash of movement, not the explosion, before the explosion. A small square device placed under a car with the precision of someone who had done it before. And then the man standing, turning, looking directly at the gap in the crate where I was hiding, looking directly at me. I opened my eyes. "He saw me," I said. "The man who planted the device. He looked right at me." Marsh was completely still. I moved through the building on instinct, past the collapsed shelving, past the cracked support beam, to a section of wall where the floor met a ridge of concrete that had always been slightly raised. A corrugated steel panel, rusted, bolted, but the seam was still there. Officers pried it open in under 4 minutes. Behind it, a sealed steel case, airtight, locked with a combination Ethan had left in his contingency file 26 years ago. Inside, a hard drive, 3 leather notebooks, detailed records, names, payments, transaction logs, spanning 1997 all the way forward. Evidence that the operation had never fully stopped. Evidence that connected directly to Marcus, to the silver-haired man who had been pressuring my family for decades. And one photograph, Ethan and me, a family barbecue, his terrible haircut, my pink jacket. On the back, in his handwriting, "She'll remember. She always remembered everything. Trust Sara Bear." I pressed that photograph to my chest and stood in the ruins of a warehouse in the gray Denver morning and cried the kind of tears you cry when 26 years of being told you are nothing finally meets the proof that someone always knew you were everything. He had buried that case in 1998 and trusted a 12-year-old girl to come back for it. He believed in me before I knew there was anything to believe in. The arrests happened fast. The silver-haired man, whose real name was nothing like what he'd told my family, was taken before sunrise. Marcus was charged with conspiracy and obstruction of justice. Dana cooperated fully with investigators. My mother gave a full statement that she had been holding for 26 years. Marsh slid a folder across the table to me the following morning. Federal victim restitution, whistleblower compensation. Numbers I read 3 times because they refused to feel real. Enough to clear every debt Dana and Marcus had put in my name. Enough for a deposit, first month, last month. Enough to restart everything. Your uncle directed that any restitution connected to his case go to the person who helped close it, Marsh said. She smiled, quietly, briefly. He planned for you, Sara, right down to the end. 3 weeks after that parking lot, I stood in a small, sunlit apartment on the east side of Denver. My apartment, my key, my door. I placed Ethan's photograph on the kitchen windowsill where the morning light would hit it, both of us grinning, his terrible haircut. I found it, I said. I came back and I found it, like you always knew I would. I restarted my business, built a client list, started volunteering Tuesday evenings at a homeless resource center because I knew which questions to ask and I knew what it felt like to be looked through. I met Officer Reyes, the officer from the parking lot, for coffee one Saturday. He looked at me in clean clothes with rested eyes and grinned. "Different look," he said. "Slightly," I said. "Something told me to run your license that night," he said. "I almost didn't." "My uncle," I said. He had a plan for everything. I had one final meeting with my mother, supervised, a conference room with fluorescent lights and 2 cups of bad coffee going cold between us. She looked smaller, real, like a person instead of a performance. "I know you hate me," she said. "I don't," I said, and I meant it. "I feel sorry for you. You spent 26 years so afraid of a secret that you destroyed your own daughter trying to keep it, and the secret came out anyway." I looked at her. The truth always does. "Are we—" she started. "No," I said gently, "but I'm not angry. I'm just done." She nodded. I stood up. She didn't call after me. It was the first time in 38 years she didn't have a final word. I walked out into the afternoon. Didn't look back. Some mornings I stand in front of that photograph before I start work, both of us grinning, his terrible haircut, my pink jacket. I think about a man who buried everything he had in a waterproof case inside a warehouse wall in 1998 and trusted a 12-year-old girl to eventually find her way back to it. Patient, deliberate, 26 years of love in a steel box. That is what it looks like when someone truly believes in you. I was never the family failure. I was never the burden. I was never the disappointment. I was the witness my uncle trusted with the most important thing he had. And when the moment finally came, I remembered. They told her she was nothing. He always knew she was everything. The truth waited 26 years. It was worth it.